At the far end of town where the gricklegrass grows, a team of professors has finally cracked the Lorax by Dr. Seuss. You may not have realized that the Lorax needed cracking, but that's why you're not an anthropologist at Dartmouth College. In a paper released Monday in the prestigious journal Nature Ecology, a look at the location of the Mount Kenya Safari Club together with data on the patchy distribution of Pata's monkeys, Figure A, researchers believe drive. Seuss based the Lorax on the plight of the Pata's monkeys, a species that depends on the Seussian-looking whistling thorn acacia trees, Figure E, for sustenance, courtesy of Dartmouth College. Handout: The Lorax by Dr. Seuss, Random House Children's Books, 72 pages, $21.99, Penguin Random House, Canada. But first, some background. As millions of children and parents know, the Lorax is about a lush land threatened by the once lure, who cuts down truffula trees to make the needs, a kind of all-purpose, full-body sweater. Lorax, a furry little spoil sport who speaks for the trees, objects with increasingly alarmed reports on the destruction caused by the once lure's industrial plant. Thanks to your hacking my trees to the ground. Article continued below. There's not enough truffula fruit to go round. Despite the story's silly words and jingly rhymes, its thesis is sobering and clear: unbridled capitalism will destroy the earth. Dr. Seuss, the pen name of the late Theodore Seuss Geisel, published the Lorax in 1971, and it quickly became a classic children's book, a staple of the environmental movement, and a major buzzkill for the logging industry. Kids realize that the Lorax wants to protect the land and the brown barbaloots, but scholars have long suspected that more is going on beneath the brightly colored tufts of the truffula trees. The new study, Dr. Seuss and the Real Lorax, stemmed from a chance encounter at Dartmouth. Nathaniel J. Deminy, an anthropology professor with 2 small children, and Donald D. Pease, an English professor who wrote a biography of Geisel, found themselves seated next to each other at an academic dinner. The 2 scholars soon realized that their work overlapped in a curious way. Deminy is an expert on primates in Kenya. Pease noted that Geisel published the Lorax soon after a trip to Kenya in 1970. As Dr. Seuss would say, "Oh, the things you can think up if only you try." Now, almost a half-century after the Lorax first popped out of a stump, his real identity can be revealed. 4 scholars, led by Deminy, explain their method like this: "We used eigenface decomposition methods to calculate facial similarities, and we generated the plot with T-distributed stochastic neighbor embedding, TSNE, an iterative algorithm that down projects multi-dimensional information into 2 dimensions for visualization." About now, you may be thinking, "I would not read that on a boat, I would not read that with a goat," but hang on. That's just a fancy way of saying that the scientists fed photos of monkeys and illustrations of the Lorax into a computer to determine the closest match. Article continued below. Their conclusion: the Lorax was inspired by the Pata's monkeys that live in West and East Africa. These creatures share the Lorax's general facial characteristics, particularly his distinctive mustache. The monkeys' vocalizations sound like the Lorax's sawdusty sneeze, and the monkeys depend, for 80% of their diet, on the Seussian-looking whistling thorn acacia trees of the Laikipia Plateau. That may seem like a set of curious but inconsequential similarities, but these authors argue that how we think of the Lorax determines how we think about his plight. Regarding the Lorax as an animal indigenous to the land of the truffula trees, challenges traditional interpretations of the Lorax as an eco-policeman asserting his authority. In other words, the Lorax isn't some tiresome scold, some shrill environmentalist who makes us want to throw up our hands and sigh, "Goodbye" thing. You sing too long. No, the Lorax is a creature intimately dependent on the land that the once lure is destroying. That, the authors suggest, makes his story much more sympathetic. Of course, it's unlikely this study will sway the who's down in Whoville. Among Dr. Seuss's books, the Lorax is strikingly apocalyptic and unusually polemic. The story's imagery grows darker and darker until the land is denuded and the atmosphere clogged. On the final page, the once Lurk, now cognizant of the destruction he's wrought but apparently unwilling to do anything about it, tosses down the last precious truffula seed to a little boy. "You're in charge," the once Lurk says. "Grow a forest. Protect it from axes that hack. Then the Lorax and all of his friends may come back. We don't need eigenface decomposition methods to know there's a lot riding on that one word, may."